Is 7:05. This is Code 95. How to teach yourself code effects and deciphering the effects wiki. My name is Cast. I'm one of the instructors and faculty here at the college. I've been at the college for about a year, and I've been DMing or in tabletop games for just about a decade. I am a self-professed heretic who started and still liked 4E. Um, you may please direct all complaints to my gerbil, who is acting as my secretary. Um, I am going to be using the go live screen share option for this. Unfortunately, a lot of it is me talking to you. This is probably going to be the most boring class you'll take here. Um, but hopefully, at the end of the class, you'll be able to take a look at the effects wiki and go, "I need to edit my AC. This is what I'm going to need to use." If you do not have already the doc or the Microsoft Word file or the PDF file open, go ahead, download it, grab it. Those are your copies. Please feel free to make notes, what have you. I will not be sitting here and reading things directly um, off the entire thing. So, it's not going to be one of those things where we all sit there and see me read each word off the screen because nobody likes that. Um, I also am going to be having Scuba, who is going to play a little bit of a teacher's assistant. Um, if there are any questions or comments you have, feel free to do it in the chat. I have a dual monitor setup open so I can see it. Um, Other than that, feel free to interrupt me with questions or what have you. There will be a break built into this. I also have scheduled it a little longer than it should be, so hopefully I can get you guys in and out as quickly as possible. Any questions so
How
far?
long is the scheduled time?
I think it's 2.5 hours.
Nope, I'm good.
Fantastic.
Alrighty. So pretty much there are a couple of different things that I need to talk about first. I have put images in this guide, so you don't necessarily need to have one of us around. You can open it up and go, wait a minute, how do I do this? I've used the simple gray template for Fantasy Grounds. I just think it's cleaner and a heck of a lot less weird, um, with some color things or icons being changed back or forth. I will have most of my snippets being used in Classic, so you can see this is a Classic entry um, image. The syntax, the coding that you'll actually be typing in, is the same for Classic and Unity. So all of the locations of the icons are generally in the same place, and unless you have a really weird or obnoxious theme, generally in the same place and generally look similar. I have played 5th Ed, Starfinder, 4E, um, 3.5, and my current favorite, Pathfinder 1, all in Fantasy Grounds. It doesn't matter which of those you call home. An AC bonus is an AC bonus. An attack bonus is an attack bonus. A damage bonus is going to be a damage bonus. I may word things a bit weird or maybe teach something to be a little bit more specific than you need to for 5th Ed, for instance, but it's still good practice. Um, Fantasy Grounds does not like changing your character sheets. So you always need to test whatever effects you do by dragging them onto the character you're operating with, um, putting it either using the self target with a button or dragging the effect onto you in the combat tracker. If you say, hey, I'm going to give myself a plus 85 to hit, um, and you put the effect on there and you throw it on. Your character sheet will not change to say, your normal bonus plus 85. Am I occasionally crying out? I can try and fix that. Okay, we'll see what that does. I also increased my pause between when the push to talk cuts in or out. Fantasy Grounds, as I said, doesn't like to adjust your character sheet. Any it will do any connections as you're rolling things. Bedlam, can you say something? Testing.
Me at all?
Yep, we can hear you.
You there, but you're very low.
You can turn them up on your end by right clicking on him and just turning his volume up so everybody can adjust them themselves.
I'll keep an eye on the chat to make sure if there's any other issues. But yeah, things will generally need to be rolled to be tested. If you have an attack bonus, you need to roll an attack first to see any bonuses. It's not going to adjust your sheet. Fantasy Grounds does not operate like that and does not like to work like that. There are a couple of places where you can use effects and actually pop them in. There is the walking man in the actual combat tracker. In 5th ed or in other editions, it may look like an axe head, or it looks like Hermes sandal, sort of a foot with a wing on it. I know it looks really weird, but that's what the icon is. We can also put it as a property on a weapon. We can put it as a type on a weapon's damage. We can do it as a spell effect. Generally, we do not like to directly add things to the character just by going in here, doing this, because we bring up the effects on this particular white dragon and saying, well, it's, let's say, immune to all. Um, because what happens is it edits that particular instance of that particular dragon, but it does nothing if you say you wanted to say you forgot that your goblins need to be fire resistant. To do that, we would actually edit the monster itself or put an effect that then clicks and can be triggered with one click as opposed to typing in. Also, as an aside, we can sometimes use keywords in the weapon names itself. Fantasy Grounds also comes with a list of status ailments, conditions for each of the rule sets. You've got the cutout for Pathfinder 1E right here. All of those keywords are things that are built in already. They can be clicked and drug over to the target or to the player. This is the same in 5th ed, although your list of conditions will not be as exhaustive. Same with 4th ed, same with Starfinder. Any questions so far on where we're going to be editing or tinkering with things?
No.
Cool. Okay. Every effect that you make is going to follow a certain syntax, which is how you phrase it. Much in the same way that we have certain ways we put sentences together in English or in your language of choice, Fantasy Grounds has its own syntax. And as a shortcut, I usually call it demo in demolition. Our four parts are our description, our effect or modifiers, and then our optional. The description is just stuff that's easy to read at a glance, and it's sometimes used for stuff that we cannot code. So if we have something that anytime you take falling damage, you take minimum damage, we would just make an effect that says take minimum falling damage and just slap it on our character. Mechanically, it does nothing. Fantasy Grounds won't recognize it and somehow magically parse it. But when our DM looks at our combat tracker, it goes, he can go, okay, that's what we're looking for. For fourth edition, sometimes this is really, really important because you have things that proc on end of next turn, um, specifically, or beginning of next turn, or um, in other editions for opportunity attacks. If you're going to use this for an actual spell, like the shield spell, as we can see down here, it acts as a label because otherwise we would just have AC 4. And if you're the DM looking at your combat tracker and you've got someone saying, wait a minute, why does he have an extra 4 AC? Hold on a second. So it's a good way to label things. Our effect or modifier. This is the part that Fantasy Grounds actually reads and interprets. These are taken from the effects wiki, and they are 9 times out of 10 case sensitive. If you have immune, and immune is in capital letters, then when you type it in, it should be in capital letters. If we have a shield spell, we can have it just be this. This is a perfect code. We have our description, and then we have our effect and modifier. Shield is a human readable part. The AC4 is the Fantasy Grounds part. We're using semicolons instead of periods. The coding language that Fantasy Grounds uses is JavaScript, Java based ish. So whenever you would think like, okay, that's an end of something, throw a semicolon in. Not a standard colon, not a comma, always a semicolon. And we can chain these things together. So if we have a ranger who's got favorite terrain, forest, we can label it. Hey, we're in our favorite terrain. We're going to get a bonus to our defenses, and we're going to get a bonus to our attack.
Question for you. Does it matter if you put a plus in front of those numbers, or is it just assumed it's a plus and only you need a negative if it's a negative?
Generally, you just need the negative. It will assume without the plus sign it's going to be adding.
And if you have an effect that, say, gives you AC 18, how would that work?
The AC is 18 or the AC bonus is 18?
The AC is 18. So, like, it just makes you 18 if you're wearing it, say.
In that point, I would just, and for like the 5th Edge Shield spell where you're become 13 plus Dex mod, just the easy way to do that is to do the quick arithmetic and then just slap in the AC bonus. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be adjusting your dexterity that awful much. Or your armor is going to be, or you're not going to be wearing armor. So they're generally going to be static numbers. But as it is, there is no way to, as far as I can tell, to set it to be, it must be this. Um, Everything that Fantasy Grounds does is it adds to a or subtracts from a roll.
Thanks.
Can you
Yeah, no
do
problem.
any kind of mathematical equation in that effect area?
Very limited and on a very limited basis. In fifth ed, the wiki actually explains it a little bit better, but you can do attack bonuses 5+ level or something. But you're not going to get much into it, and they generally only operate off of your ability stats or something that's already pre-coded in a field.
Okay.
Which brings me to another point. Um, Everything cannot be coded automatically. There are some things. Um, Pathfinder 1, there is a spell that gives you a swim speed. So instead of just flailing about and moving at half speed, you can actually move your full X feet as a move action. There's no way to code that in there. We can put a little like description here, you know, fins of the sea, 4 minutes, set our duration, and just have the effect go. So at that point in time, it becomes what is the best way to let your DM know what's happening so they don't have to constantly stop and go, wait a minute, where's this bonus coming from? Where's this coming from? Where's that coming from?
Question. If you have effects, is it GM centric, like the GM has to create the effects, or can players create other effects themselves, or is it a combination of both?
Players can create effects of their own. In fact, what I would suggest if you are a player, I would talk with your GM and say, hey, I'm trying to learn all the effects coding. Let me take a stab at a couple of things if you need it, or, rely on me to quickly throw up a spell effect and then add it to the player. On all of my characters, and this is getting ahead a little bit, have an extra spell class that is just called extra crap. Where, okay, here's my effect if I want to do a charge. Here's this person's total defense effect. Here's the bard's um, inspiration, bardic knowledge, or I'm sorry, performance. That's the word I'm looking for. Um, Bonus because he didn't code it for some reason. And then you can drag effects onto other players just as the GM can.
Sorry, I guess what I mean is, if a GM creates the effects, all players get to see those effects. But if a player creates the effects, would they be able to see? Would other players be able to see their effects and use them?
I believe that is a setting in the actual Fantasy Grounds and on the combat tracker. So let me bring this up. I am a GM in this one. So what I can do is I can go into this, and I realize it's kind of small. But we have this white dragon, and I can have the effect be on or off or skipped, and I can have it visible to the GM or to everybody. Now, to continue to answer your question, there are two places where you can keep effects. I will bring up a character. So this is a lot of crap. I know. This is like two multi-classes and what I was saying before, I made effects for everything. I have this extra, so I can literally, here's my flanking bonus. There we go. No one else can see what's in here because it's in my sheet as spells, but everyone can see it in the combat tracker. If the GM wants to make certain things available for everyone to use, there is an effects button up here. That they can make custom ones, and then everyone can see this and apply it. So if you were a player, you would see this fight defensively and total defense, and you could click and drag it onto whatever character you were using.
Where does that effects tab come from?
It's in the top right-hand corner. Usually there are two similar effects things. One is your modifiers, and it looks like a square with some holes cut out in the middle. And the other one is the effects. In my case, it looks like a dude with stars around his head. It may look like a walking dude, or it may look like, once again, that Hermes sandal sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Your modifiers here are what you would use for attack. So if it is a touch attack, I click it and then I roll it and it automatically says it's a touch attack, or if the person is under cover or concealment. So back to our demo, once again, description effects and our modifiers. We're getting to our optionals. This is important in Pathfinder 1. It is not as important in other ones. In Pathfinder 1, we cannot have bonuses of a similar type stack. You cannot have two armor bonuses because that means you're wearing two different sets of armor. You cannot have two different shield bonuses unless you literally are using two shields and are doing nothing else with your turn. So in our shield spell, we actually use our optional to say it is a shield bonus. That is our AC4. Now this, unless you're playing Pathfinder 1, it doesn't matter until you get to weapons. So let's say we have a sword, and the sword does an extra D8 of fire damage. Doesn't matter if you actually wield it. If it's in its scabbard and you give someone a Glasgow kiss, just headbutt them right in the nose, you're gonna do an extra D8 of fire damage. We're gonna call it the bitchin' sword of hellfire. This is fine. This is great. It works as it is until we get to a fire elemental. Because for all intents and purposes, and I don't know the 5th ed monster manual, let's say fire elementals are immune to fire. Makes sense. If we slice the fire elemental with the Sword of Hellfire, as it's coded right here, it will do an extra D8 of fire damage, which will go through, which isn't how it's supposed to work. Now, if we make it the not as bitchin' Sword of Hellfire, and we add our optional to the damage, so damage of 1d8 fire type, what will happen is what you see in the boxes below. It will hit, it will do the fire damage, and then it will say it's partially resisted as it sucks up that fire damage and doesn't do anything. We can see the combat tracker down here. Rallo is immune to fire, and Zahil is doing damage of a fire type. Any questions on that? Cool.
Yes. There is a list of the optional words you can use, right?
Correct. I think at the top of this, there are links to the different wikis. I'm going to get there and show you all the optionals. In this case, it would be called damage type, or otherwise it would be called properties. But because I really like the mnemonic demolition, I'm calling them optionals. But we will get there.
Question for you then, is it only for the rule sets that are at the top, or are these things like, how would you have to code them into a different rule set?
The rule sets that are there generally each have different labels. So for Pathfinder, there is no radiant damage. That's a 5th ed damage type. In I think 3.5, I don't believe there's thunder damage. I think it's electricity damage. They are labeled on the different wikis if there's an effects page. If there is not, then there probably are modules or extensions that will allow you to create your own custom properties or optionals in order to do simple matching. So if you have a Savage World 1 and someone's immune to, I don't know, silver damage, and that's not necessarily a thing in your particular version of Savage Worlds. There may be an extension that says if damage type equals silver, make it immune or create um, the type.
Was there a way to create that effects window so that it's source book lined up with whatever source book you're wanting to use? Is there a way to create multiple different ones for whatever rule set you're on?
How do you mean?
Well, you got your two effects boxes up in the upper right.
Mhm.
Got the one where, like, I bought the Rob Tui's effects where it just fills out all of those. Is there a way to create extensions of that depending on what skill set you're playing? So, like, if you're playing a 2E, you're obviously going to have different effects based on the syntax for that version versus 5e will have a different set of syntax. Is there a way to create a type of window that would allow you to separate these out?
So I'll actually be showing you how Rob Tweed did his effects, as far as creating them in like a different spell book that allows you to put drag and drop them. Um, that will be when we get into spell effects. So we're gonna cover that.
Okay.
Okay. So back to where we're putting things. This is a weapon and it's in the Pathfinder rule set. However, it will look very similar to a 5th ed or a 3-5 or a 4e. But the main things we want to focus on here is this type area under damage. In some cases, we'd have properties and we can do touch, and that's how we get energy AC for those of you who play Starfinder. Adding in touch to the weapon properties will allow you to do that in Pathfinder Touch AC. But the damage here, this is saying we're going to roll a d8 plus 1 of the magic or bludgeoning type. You can chain a number of these together. In fact, if you have a magic weapon, generally it's a good idea to put magic in the damage type. Um, they need to be separated by commas. They need to be lowercase. There are a couple of instances specifically for the medieval and rule sets. You will see cold iron, silvered, and adamantine be as a damage type rather than a weapon property. This makes sense if you think about it, because a monster that is immune to everything but adamantine would be looking for, quote, adamantine damage. So that's just something to keep in mind for that. For weapons, and I'll actually go into Fantasy Grounds and show this to you all. So we have our wonderful Mad Lad, Rianu Keeves. And Rianu is going to have, we're going to make a Wand of Cure Wounds or Cure Light Wounds. So we can just right click on our weapons, add a new one. In 5e, it's pretty similar. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in square bracket, capitals, HEAL, and bracket. And then Wand Cure Wounds, Wand Cure Light Wounds, whatever. We're going to change this to ranged. And then wands, usually 50 charges. Cool, ammo's 50. Let's hit our magnifying glass. And then what we can do is we can drag our 2d4, or we can drag our 1d8 plus 1, depending on what rule set you're doing, into the damage area. We probably want to get rid of the crits because I don't think we can crit on a wand, even though that would be awesome. And we don't really need to type because this heal bit up here is going to override everything. So we've got this. We have Rallo over here who's got 7 points of damage. It is Rianu Keefe's turn. He's going to take his wand out. He's going to smack Rallo upside the head and say, you're healed. So we're just going to click the damage dice over, and we're going to drop it on Rallo. It rolled the heal, and it did heal up that. At that point in time, we can check off one of our uses. That way, when we do a short rest or a long rest or an overnight rest, it won't clear out and then we lose how many charges as if we were potentially doing it as a MacGyvered spell.
Do you have to manually check off the charges?
The only rule set I've seen that does that out of the box is Starfinder, but that's because everything's operated on firearms. I'm sure there's an extension that does it, but out of the box, I have just seen it where you need to click it.
Okay, thank you.
And then if we wanted to do our flaming weapon, we could do we have our sword. We're going to make our damage type slashing and fire. Cool. And then we can see it appears in here in the damage area. Questions on that so far?
Can you demonstrate that weapon attack and see how it comes out, what it looks like?
Sure. This one is going to appear because we are editing the weapon directly. In the Hellfire sword that I did earlier, it is a spell effect, so no matter what we did, we were always going to get the fire damage. In this case, I have an Asmar who is not vulnerable to fire, and I have a white dragon that is vulnerable to fire. So the Asmar is going to take the full 8. And the white dragon took the 8. However, this is what the die was rolling, but we see down here the damage was 12 because it took 1.5 times damage, yada, yada, yada. Once again, this is Pathfinder rules, so if that didn't make sense and you play 5e, that's why.
If you had a weapon that did say D8 damage normally, but did say an extra D6 say against something that was vulnerable against fire, how would you code that in?
So at that point in time, if it's vulnerable to fire, then the damage is normally going to be fire. So I would do it the same way, like a flame
Yeah.
tongue weapon or a +1 flaming longsword.
Yeah, I'm thinking of things like a holy weapon. Holy weapons only do additional damage against kind of creatures that are vulnerable to holy, like outsiders and stuff. So if you think about, I mean, we play 3.5, but I'm assuming similar in sort of 4 and 5th. You get like a holy sword, and it's
Mhm.
like a D8 sword normally, but against a demon, it's the normal D8 and an additional D6.
There are 2 ways to do it. There is one which is sort of a MacGyvered fashion. The other one is the way it should be out of the box. So if you bought a monster manual and it had a zombie or whatever, 9 times out of 10 it would say undead. It would say vulnerable holy or vulnerable positive or vulnerable good, depending on how deep down the rabbit hole of paladins you went. In this case, it'd be the same as the dragon. It is vulnerable to fire. It would say vulnerable holy, vulnerable positive, etc. The other way is what Scuba pasted in, and we'll get to at the very end. We can actually have if statements. So we can evaluate if a target is a certain monster type, if it is a certain alignment, if it is a certain size, then do something. So if your ranger has a favorite enemy undead, if type is undead, then do an extra d8. However, if you've bought a monster manual or if it's a generally well accepted community pack, it should have some of those vulnerabilities in it already. It may fall under something called undead traits in the actual mob entry. And that's sort of a Pathfinder thing that is a catch-all for all undead generally have these weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and strengths.
Yeah, in 3.5, there's holy weapons just do extra damage against anything with the evil trait.
Okay.
So
So yeah,
it's
we
we've
can
been MacGyvering it. I suspect there's a better way. I've actually been setting up two weapons. One which is for against normal creatures, and one against evil creatures that have both got two different damages on them. And then my party asked me, which one should I be using against this creature? Which is a bit long-winded, but it's been working for us so far. I was hoping to get a better way.
so we will toward the end when we get into if targeting.
Fabulous.
Okay. Spell effects. This is going to be the meat and potatoes of everything. Just about every effect you do is going to be a spell effect. Even if you're a fighter that has sworn off magic because, instead of gangster shooting your mom and dad, it was a magic missile that vaporized it, and now you're the Dark Knight of Athkathla or whatever. Um, Everything is going to be in a spell effect. That is how Rob Tui does his effects. That is how your regular spells do their effects. It's just the best place that has the most amount of versatility for whatever you're trying to do. Um, I'm going to run through the next couple of pages really quick. You can sit there and read it. I believe someone was talking about DM effects and who can see what. We're getting back to that. So I have an extra stuff, which is a new spell class. Once again, Pathfinder 3.5. In 5th Ed, you would just add a new item down here, and then you'd hit the star for a new spell class or a new power class. So we're going to actually make a potion of cure wounds. Okay, we're going to go up here. In Pathfinder 3.5, we have various different prepared, and the reason why it's spazzing out is because it doesn't like the button I'm using for push to talk. Okay, so we're going to type in cure wounds. Cool, whatever. And we can right click on here. We're going to add a new spell action. And there are a number of different effects you can do. We can have a cast, which is actually like, hey, this is like a fireball. People need to roll rain or reflex or dexterity saving throws. Damage. This is a magic missile. It's going to hit. Just roll me the damage. Heal, which is what we're going to do right now. Very basic entry. It looks the exact same as a weapon. Just grab your dice, throw it in. It's a really nice potion. It's got a +5. And boom, that's it. As the DM, what you can do then, and assume Rianu Keeves is my testing character. You're in your game, you're doing pre-game prep, you've got a magic weapon, magic item, or you've got a couple of potions you needed coding. You make your potion, and then we can go into our spells section. We can go into our groups, and we can make a new group. It's just your campaign name here, whatever. The GM can then drag your little info blip, the Paizo logo, the Wizards of the Coast logo, Dragon logo, whatever it is right here, over and we now have it saved in the spell database. From there, all I need to do is right click it and hit the share sheet button. This P comes up to show public, and so then anybody so you go in and you say, you got a potion of dark vision, potion of cure light wounds. Person can go into their spells, click and drag it over. I'm going to take the shield one in this case and add it to their sheet.
Why wouldn't that be put in items?
So items generally only hold text.
So then, so because it's a magic item or whatever, it's best to put it in the spell list versus the items list.
What I would do in this case is make the item, because we're going to need the descriptive text anyway. So let's do this. I filled most of it out, and there are certain things you can put under type if it is armor or weapons that actually give you the damage area and the AC area to fill out. But we can just at this point do here, unlock it. From this point, we can take the Cure Wounds potion and put it in any parcels that you have. So, this room's got a treasure chest. It's got 8 of these potions. You drag it in, hit the 8, call it a day. Then if a pro player wants to use it, you're like, okay, cool. Here's your extra stuff. Just, it's a spell, drag it in. And I suppose this is really
Could you
kind of,
not attach the spell to the item?
I was thinking about that. I'm not sure if it's got the space under the descriptive text. It may just be a plain text, but let me try. Ah, there you go. Let's lock it. There you go. Learn something new every day. So you can. So in that case, I would probably do. And just append that to the very bottom. So there are differences among the rule sets. However, 9 times out of 10, it's going to look pretty similar. You may not have all of the you may not have all of these different options, but you're going to have the not identified name. You're going to have a cost. You're going to have a weight, and then you're going to have a descriptive area down here. So once again, not exact, but the same sort of slots are going to be there. And once again, an AC bonus is an AC bonus is an AC bonus. If you let me know at the end of this, Fort Hood, I will go over some of the stuff and fit that for you. Okay. So I guess a better case of this would be bunch of stuff here.
And I suppose if you actually set up in the spells, you could put a group, couldn't you, that's got like, I don't know, items or something, under the spells.
Yes, I would definitely do that because chances are you're going to have um, a, a group for each book. You're going to have a group for your campaign, and then you may have extra stuff that's here and there that, oops, I forgot to label something, like my new. There shouldn't be anything in here. I should have went through and hit the add new button, typed it out, and did it properly.
Yeah, so I'm already cursing. You've taught me something. I went and I did that for potions the other day, and I think it took me about 7 hours to go through each character individually and set them up individually. I didn't realize you could save them and then just drag them in. So, oh well, at least I won't do it again.
So if you get to that point, and let's say in this case, I want my wiffle bat and my cure wounds item to be in something different. So I've created a new group, and I'm going to open up the 2 items. I'm going to go into the group that I have and just click the info blip and drag it in. So now I have them in the group I want them to be. These are separate entries from the new group, so I can go in and just delete these. And I still have the items in my 630 group.
Now, because you've deleted them out of the new group, what happens to characters that were dragged from the new group? Does it matter, or is the item not doesn't matter about the group?
It doesn't matter about the group as it's still an entry in your database and the text is saved in the character sheet. So the character sheet is a .xml file, um, which is, it kind of looks like a web page, but it's just a really easy way of labeling stuff. Your database file in Fantasy Grounds that your campaign is in is a series of database and XML readable lines of code. So to say it's duplicating things a lot is a bad way of putting it, but it's duplicating things a lot, which is how you can have a version of your white dragon that may be immune to the wish spell, but your entry of the white dragon in the bestiary is normal, and then you have one that is a player character or an NPC that is level 2 instead of level 38,000.
So then, if you update an item, you literally have to go back for anybody who has that item in their character sheet and copy the new one.
Correct. Which is a pain in the butt until you end up accidentally deleting something that you were working on, and then it's okay, well, it's either I have to update things or I just lost whatever hours of my work. Generally, though, if it's a something like these potions that you do it, you test it, it works, you're done. You're not really gonna touch them much. Dark vision potion. So there is no mechanical benefit, at least in Classic right here, for a potion that says you have dark vision or not. So we're actually going to go back to our D and demo for description. We're going to right click on it. We're going to add our spell action. We're going to hit effect. This next window will look slightly different for those of you in 5e. I know. This top part is where we're going to put in our effects coding, and that's going to be the same no matter which one. So we're just going to say, this character's got dark vision. It's a human, he drank the potion. Potion's good for an hour. He's got dark vision. So what we can do is we just type whatever in here. Shorter the better, generally. For 1 hour. And we're good. So then right here, all we need to do is click on the whoever we have it targeted, or we can select it to be the self, whatever, or we can just click and drag the button onto the individual that's drinking the potion. So now Rianu Keeves has dark vision, and it's going to be good for an hour.
And there's no built-in coding to the fantasy grounds to allow for different.
And could you put like a range on that? So like if it's dark vision, 120 feet.
Hold on. First question.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So is there no coding within fantasy grounds to allow, like, if one character is moving, they've got different vision?
So in Classic, there is no real vision anything. Line of sight and all that is something that is in Unity, and that is still being worked on.
Okay.
So as it is in Classic, no. You unhide a mask, and it's visible to anyone that's there. I have not used Unity in a great deal. It is still in beta. When that gets sorted out, and Smiteworks has said, okay, we're done with all the changes, and this is pretty much what it's going to look like, what our end goal is, we'll start doing classes on line of sight. That is something that Layroon wanted to get on as soon as we could.
Thank you.
Thorin, yes, you can. Anything that is here in your description, you can put in the chat window. So I could say dark vision. Dark vision up to 120 feet, unless it's a mind flare. Cool. And we can see in my effects, dark vision up to 120 feet, unless it's a mind flare. The general thing with your descriptive here is that we want
Which
to
is
be
why you
as
want it so short then.
correct. Because if you can see here under Rallo, I mean, he's got 2 effects on him already, but that's 3 lines of stuff. Now, when you are the DM, you can sit there and go, okay, Rallo, no one wants to see your godforsaken code. We're just going to make this visible to the GM only. This is little bip right here underneath the on, off, or skip. So then the players don't see this top one anymore. All they'll see is the flanking. When it is hidden, and some of these will be when you drag monsters onto your combat tracker, they will be in parentheses. You can see the Asmar here. I have it's hidden, and it's also got the parentheses. So that way when they encounter it, and even if they identify it, they're not going to see the Asmar resistances.
Are there ways to have other conditions like paralyzed or grappled, what have you, show up in that same area through coding?
Yes. Reading ahead in the script, however, short answer. Anything in here?
Just drag and drop it on there.
Mhm.
Gotcha. All right.
Depending on the effect. Go ahead, Thorn.
I was just wondering, is there a way to add other conditions there? I mean, I know it would be scripting, but is there a way to do that for all the rule sets, or is that specific to a specific game?
Let me finish Rodolfo's questions first, then I get to yours. I completely
I
forgot
think
your
I think you
question.
finished it. You just said from here, drag it on to the character.
Right. Oh, some of depending on the situation and the effect, some of these have already pre-coded stuff in there. So if you do deafened and then roll a perception check, it's possible that you will get a penalty. I'm not necessarily sure I like that because obviously it would only be for certain types of perception checks. And in Pathfinder, it shrunk down perception from 5 skills to 1. However, for 3.5, it would be like if you're dazzled, you get a -2 to spot and search checks. But some of these are pre-coded in. If it's immobile, you're still, if it's the paralyzed or um, unconscious effect, you're still going to be able to move your token, obviously. Um, but any mechanical benefits such as additional damage or additional attacks or lower AC will be applied.
Yeah, thanks.
Thorin, this section right here, um, you can search for any custom effects or you can actually create your own. Dark vision, unless it's a dark gnome, and I don't know how to spell that word and don't really even really care. Um, but what happens then is your players, they won't necessarily see the edit button or anything, but they will be able to see these buttons that they can drag and drop onto the individual. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was actually trying to figure out how I could add that condition block to a game that I'm using with Fate Core, but I can just manually add them. I just wanted something that was permanent they couldn't get rid of.
So these are the conditions that are in 3.5 and Pathfinder. The 5e list is much shorter. Fate Core may even have separate conditions that Pathfinder or D&D doesn't have. Um, it just depends on what is a common condition or effect that is used in your rule set, but you can always do the custom stuff.
The custom ones that you make, though, can they or can they not have any kind of magical effect attached to them?
It acts just like the dark vision line we did here. So
Right.
I have my total defense AC 4 as a dodge bonus. Um, I could make it you do fire damage. Is that what you were getting at?
Well, so the description is there to say what it is, but is it actually affecting anything, or do you have to manually put the account for those changes?
So this is a bank of items. So let's look at Rianu Keeves, and we're gonna give him. Oh, here we go. Fight defensively. So I've clicked and dragged it on it. Of whatever, he gets a -4 to his attacks. So when he rolls an attack, we see down here the effect is -4. So the effect is actually taking into account.
So when you create a custom condition there, can you add in an effect like that to your custom ones?
In this custom area, yes, you can add whatever you can for regular coding. I'm not necessarily sure I understand the question. You really can't change this custom column on the left. Those are hard coded into the system. You can create your own ones in this right column.
Right. The ones that you create, though, can you attach like a spell effect to something there?
Uh, all of these 3 items are, for lack of a better phrase, the same thing you would type in for a spell effect.
Okay.
So literally, you could drag and drop the total defense on a shield, and then if you're using the shield, if the shield's equipped, total defense would show up.
You would click and drag it onto the person that it's actually applied to. Savage Worlds is a bit different because you can actually add effects onto items. Um, But in the case of someone that is just sitting there holding their shield up, doing absolutely nothing, you would just drag it onto their character. They would get a higher AC for the entire rest of the turn, and then once it became their turn, the effect would turn off.
In practice, you find it easier to add effects that have got a 1 round duration and then have players add them on every round, or like give them an infinite duration and then let them switch it off when they want to. Just thinking of, I created an effect for a dodge ability, we'll say, and my players found it really annoying having to put it on every round.
So dodges in the feet +1 to AC.
Yeah, but it's only against one attacker. That's the problem with it, is it only works against the first attacker. So if you've got multiple attackers, it's kind of a toss up between like having it work against one hit or having it, but then they have to put it on and off all the time, and I think that was driving them crazy.
So within the spell effects or in the combat tracker, you have each effect is on its own line. It has a crosshair. You can click and drag the crosshair to target one mob. So in your specific case with dodge, I would have it as an infinite thing. So they would add it, and then they would click and drag the cursor or the crosshairs onto the person they're dodging against. There's a Pathfinder-ish effect that you can do something to only one monster to eventually go invisible to only them. And so that's sort of how I would do it. So you would have an invisibility effect here and then just drag it onto that. So if that particular enemy attacks you, it rolls the mischance. Everyone else just does the normal attack.
Ah, you see, I wondered what that button did. I wasn't sure what it did, to be honest. But no, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly what we need. I think. I say it's. I think it's just a bit irritating for players to have to like keep putting effects on every single round.
Now, it might end up that once that mob dies, that effect might disappear, so they'd have to re-add it. However,
Yeah, it's slightly less annoying though, isn't it?
pretty much. Any other questions? Hood. So the effects window for Rob's is literally just going into the spell window.
I'm at the one where it's got the little zombie picture, and then you pull it up. It's got paralyzed the ones that are hardcore into the system. Then it populates that long list to the right. That the window you had up.
I don't believe I have that particular.
You pull up the window that shows paralyzed and all of that. The one you just had up.
Mhm.
Right, that on his effects, that right empty area to the right is populated with like over 100 different effects. We add to that list.
Yes, the same way you add to any other list. The edit button down in the bottom right,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then press the green button.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. We've gone through just about everything. I am actually going to say we're going to take a 10-minute break. And we're going to get into the big coding bits and looking at the wiki. So yeah, if everyone wants to be back, I'm going to say on the 20.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
thanks.
Sounds good.
Mhm. And Fort Hood, let me know if you are going to break or not.
No, I'm
Okay, so once again, this is a 5e campaign. I'm still using a gray theme because it looks decent. This is your same effects window.
Yes. That looks a lot more familiar.
So yeah, this long sword, it's got the same sort of information here. Same sort of windows. Your powers in this case would be the extra stuff.
Like on the 5e, we can actually create categories, and then populate it with like movement effects, different things, or race effects or trait effects, and create categories.
So let's see which one of his do I have. I'm just gonna go race traits.
And I know that one loads up on the spell window.
So yeah, literally it's just finding wherever the best place to add your effects are and then adding them into a group.
And we can create a group within that spell window. Right?
Yes, you can do that in any of the rule sets by hitting the drop down and then the edit button.
Then your advice is to keep it in the spells because that's the most versatile way of doing it.
Correct. So if you have an item that's like a magical sword, then obviously we want to make the magical sword an item because that's how people equip it and all that. However, if it does something special, like it's extra damage versus demons, then that's a spell effect that we should put in either in your campaign group or in your um, magical items in a new group that's just magical items.
So if you have just like, let's just say for sake of this discussion, you have just a regular first level fighter with just standard armor and a shield, does the AC automatically adjust for the shield, or is there an effect that needs to be put in so that standard shield reflects the armor class?
So that's actually item coding, which is something in the DM classes. However, I can show a little bit about that.
Not necessarily a magical weapon, just standard item so that it reflects correctly.
Oh, of course, it's not shield in 5e. What is it? Okay, so you would create a new item.
Oh.
And then under this type, you would type armor.
Okay.
Capital A. Alternatively, you would type in weapon, capital W.
Okay.
From there, your bonus to your armor is here. And then you would type in everything else to figure out what other items are. Say you have one particular item, you want to emulate some of it. We just move it off and then move it back on to make a copy of it.
All right, which allows you to modify it.
Also, it gives us the opportunity to see how it's coded.
Okay. And open it up without.
So in this case, if we didn't have armor typed in, we wouldn't have this bonus here. See how
Now,
those fields disappear?
right. And Fantasy Grounds doesn't have the way to copy and paste that wording, though, right?
You can use Control A and Control A, Control C, and Control V. So
Okay.
let's say I want to do the notes here. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to press and hold Control key and then A, which selects all,
Okay.
and then Control C for copy. I'm going to click in my target and then Control V as in Victor for paste.
Okay.
Now, outside of that, if it's a lot of stuff that if you only want to change like the +1 bonus on a shield, just make a copy of it and just change it like this.
Yeah, I learned how to do that because some of the monsters don't have tokens, so I learned how to make a copy so I can add a token.
So then we have this +1 shield that's modified. It is an item, it is there, it's going to stay there. If we drag it onto the character sheet, it parses it, it reads it, and then it modifies stuff as it goes.
Okay.
So we have this shield.
So the effect is in that window. You don't need to add a secondary effect.
Correct. And we're going to make sure this new shield is worn. And we should be able to look at, yeah, RIC is exorbitant now.
Isn't there an effect out there that, like, if you're switching during combat between a one-handed weapon with a shield to a two-handed weapon, isn't there an effect that drops the shield?
That you would have to unwear the shield if you're going to use your two-handed weapon.
I think it has. It's kind of outside the purview of this class, but I think I saw an effect on the forum that will actually, if you switch to two-handed weapons, it'll drop the shield, which lowers your armor class.
It's quite possible. It's also possible that it might be an
That
extension.
might be in the rule set.
And if it is an extension, it's possible. Extensions are really something you need to watch out for because it could be current and it could be great and working with no problem. It could be something that was made for a Fantasy Grounds version 3 years ago that doesn't work at all with Unity and makes it crash. So
Yeah, I've seen that where some of them aren't being monitored, and you'll see advisories: don't use this or use it at your own peril.
right, and Thorin also brought up a point. It is possible that the rule set is coded smart enough that if the weapon does say two-handed and you have a shield equipped, then it drops your AC bonus for 1 round or something.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm. All right. Okay, we are in the home stretch, and hopefully I'll be able to get you guys out with some semblance before 9:30. I think we'll be able to, though. Okay, so each of the effects wikis are beasts of documents, and it doesn't matter which rule set you're looking at. Unfortunately, the wikis are written by Smiteworks and/or Smiteworks volunteers as they have time to do it. So some of the items were converted over. Pathfinder 3.5 has one, 5e has one, strangely enough, 4e has one. Starfinder does not have one at the moment. I don't know why. They just don't. Um, but there are a number of different things we need to go over first before we just turn you loose on the page and then say, figure it out. I will use words and phrases that the other effects and coding teachers will not use. They will call them something different. I personally like mnemonics, and I like, you know, words in certain areas so I can learn better. Um, you may not um, be of that mindset or learning style. You may like what Fell does or Matt does. Those are the other two that I know do code and effects classes sometimes. Um, Once again, this isn't a full effects and coding class. This is enough so that you all can understand where stuff is coming from, um, and how to decode stuff if you're even if you're unsure of it. So let's take a look at the fifth ed. The fifth ed is a little bit better than the 3.5 Pathfinder and 4e, as it has some pictures and explanation, but not necessarily a lot of it. So we have, sort of what we've been going through, what we went through. Um, Once again, damage types, that sort of thing. We have some of the basic math and arithmetic that we were talking about earlier. Attack minus strength, attack half level, attack twice a con modifier. That's about as deep as we're going to go, and as Fantasy Grounds goes. So on the first part, we have conditions and status effects. This is the same in the Pathfinder and in the 4e um, wiki. These are the items that are on that left column in the effects area that were pre-coded. Blinded, encumbered, frightened, restrained, etc. If we look at the unconscious one, we have our first column which says what the effect is. This is what we're actually going to type into the effect because these are pre-recorded. These are pre-existing in the rule sets. If we type in unconscious semicolon and apply it to a character, it will remember, okay, hey, this is actually a keyword that's already coded in. We got this. You don't need to do anything else. Just type in unconscious, drag it over to the character, done. The second column is what it's doing. So the unconscious effect gives you the prone effect, and it gives you the grant advantage on attacks effect. This is what we actually type in, like AC or DMG or ATK, and we'll get to that. This is something we would type in just in the effect window and drag it in. However, prone has its own set of stuff that goes along with it. Disadvantage on attack rolls, granting advantage to attacks that are melee, and granting disadvantages to attacks that are of ranged types. So when you throw all of this together, the unconscious effect does this. It gives you disadvantage on attack rolls from being prone. It grants advantage on melee attacks against the unconscious person. They're laying down, they're not moving, you can just stab them through the top of the head. Granting disadvantage on ranged attacks against the unconscious person because they're prone. They're, for lack of a better phrase, hiding on top of a hill. But it also grants advantage on ranged attacks against the unconscious person because prone. The first 3 bullet points are from prone, and the last one is from unconscious. This checks out. You cannot have an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. It just flattens it out so it does nothing. This third column is just a general description of what other things it may do. Any questions on that? All right. And we have a number of different ones. Okay. The modifiers. These are all the things we type in. This is where we're going to say we want our armor class bonus or penalty. We want our damage bonus or penalty. We want our initiative bonus or penalty, and etc. We can change damage types. We can do ongoing damage. We can queue regeneration, immunities, resistances, or vulnerabilities. This is all the stuff we type in. All the stuff we type in here. I've also switched the screen to 5e because I had a couple questions for that. So this could be, and call it a day. Etc. This middle column, or the second from the left column, however, where it's in parentheses, this is an expected value. This is what Fantasy Grounds is hoping is going to be there. So if I tell you what's 1 plus 2, you could give me a few different answers. You could give me 3 written down. You could give me 3 like holding your fingers up, or you could write down the number 3. We have general sense of logic and understanding. I may not have wanted you to write down 3 in letters, but cool, you know how to add. Fantasy Grounds is not that smart. Computer programs are generally not that smart. If any of you are halfway into programming or web design or even Java or small back end, this is like the difference between a string, a variable, or a number. And that's going way too far into computer programming than I want to, but it does matter in this case. So anytime we have a D in parentheses, it means we are expecting a dice or we are expecting a number. So my attack, it's expecting a D. So I could say attack colon 1d6. And it will, okay, here's your d20 and then here's your extra d6. I could say attack colon 2. Okay, roll your d20, we're going to add 2 to it. AC, ACs are fairly static. We just want a number. All right, let's not get fancy. We're just going to take 5 and add it. Cool. AC is 12, and then you have this bonus. Here's another 5. Your AC is 17. Done. Damage type. Dash. In this case, we're looking for words. We're looking for fire. We're looking for bludgeoning. We're looking for radiant. We're looking for positive. We're looking for chaotic. You all are catch my drift. We don't necessarily need damage type 5 because Fantasy Grounds will go, what? Same with immune. You're not immune 5 fire. You're just immune to fire. And sometimes it doesn't, we really don't even need it. If someone has cover, they have cover. If someone has superior cover, they have superior cover. Cool. Those are static in-game written things that have been hard-coded in.
Does that mean you put nothing in those cases?
Correct. It means the person has cover, and it says, okay, this means certain targets have a cover bonus, and the target is going to have a -2 to attack. These are like exhausted or unconscious. They're pre-coded in, so Fantasy Rounds goes, oh yeah, I know what that means. Now, these may or may not be the correct fifth ed things. These will vary based on the rule set you're using. And we can see here at the bottom in the fifth ed, 3-5 Pathfinder, 4E and Starfinder. These parentheses all mean the same. You're always going to have an AC value that's going to need that particular value. However, this is where it's labeled in this blue box right here. Let's go back here. See, this goes back to our sword from before. We have our damage, and it's going to say, hey, we want a dice or a number. So we're actually going to say damage 1d8. And then you can see here in this third column, this is its syntax. This is what it's expecting to see as far as your coding goes. So damage type, fire. If there's extra stuff on critical, which I generally don't use. However, we can look here at our example. We have our description. We have our damage, our dice or number, and our damage type. At the bottom of this chart in the effects wikis, you will have this list. Kath, the 3-5 Pathfinder is going to be different, obviously.
Yeah.
But this is where you're going to find the stuff that you're going to put in the damage type for your weapon. This is going to be where you put in your damage type for your spell effect.
So like poisoned or whatever.
So poison damage, not poisoned as a status ailment. So like, there's one 5e cantrip that you just blow a bunch of diseased mosquitoes in someone's face. I forget. It's a cantrip, but it does poison damage. So you would do your
Poison spray, I think is what you're looking for.
There you go.
Infestation.
One of those. You would type in, you drag your dice over for damage. It would be a D10, and then it would be poison in the damage type. Your Sacred Flame does your radiant damage. Your Magic Missile does force. Your weapons do your bludgeoning, your piercing, your slashing. But remember earlier I said adamantine, cold forged iron, magic, and silver are also damage types. Even though the weapon is made out of it, it is still a damage type. With this in mind, Fantasy Grounds does some matching. So if we go up here we go. This adult bronze dragon, it is immune to lightning. So if we have our thing do lightning damage, it will match. Is damage equal lightning? No. Okay, cool. not immune. Is damage equal lightning? Yes, immune. Don't let any damage go through. And this is the icon I mean with the axe head or Hermes sandal.
So if you had a spell that made them have a condition of poison, you could then put poisoned in the damage of the effect, and then it would put that effect on the person that got hit.
It would depend on the poison. So what that would happen, and I'm saying this before, and I don't know how poisons work in fifth ed. I know there is a poison type, damage type, but if you have something that says you need to make a Constitution saving throw, or you are infected with a poison that gives you -2 to your con score for 5 minutes, then what you would do is let's go ahead and make our poison.
There
Yeah,
is a
there's actually a condition called poison.
right.
Oh, cool. So then, yes, you would either drag it from here or
Okay, so even though that's for a blade, you're putting in your powers rather than actually on the weapon itself.
correct. So I'm gonna go through this in a second. So I have my poison blade. I'm going to add a cast of it. So I'm going to go in here. It's a melee attack. It's going to use the regular attack for it. And then they're going to need to make a Constitution saving throw. The saving throw is, I'm going to say 15. So I can switch it to fixed. And then what I'm going to do is add another action, add an effect, and then we can give it the poisoned effect. It's good for 5 rounds, we'll say.
Instead of typing it in, could you just drag and drop the condition into the effects that you're creating?
Does not look like it. No, sir.
Nope. Okay.
Once again, this is a keyword. It is pre-coded into Fantasy Grounds. So the only thing is it needs to match, and it's a good idea to have the semicolon like having a period at the end of the sentence. Okay, so at this point in time, we can either attack the dragon with it, or we can do our attack as per normal. 6 to 1/2 dozen another, we have it set to melee. Say it hits, we can then click and drag our save onto the dragon. The dragon rolls, the dragon gets a 23, it passes.
Is there a way to code in the fact that it would take only, say, half damage in that case instead of not taking anything at all?
Yes. So here at the bottom on save, there's only generally one option. Half on success. So then it operates the same way as it does on criticals when you're a player. If you've ever rolled a critical and then accidentally rolled a dice again, you have to manually roll your damage dice twice or whatever your critical variant is to do the proper amount of damage. So in this case, if it does end up succeeding and then you do something else, so Fantasy Ground says, oh, all right, never mind, we don't need this. And then at the end of the turn, you're like, wait, I forgot to apply damage. You're going to have it reduced or have your DM reduce it. Okay, so it fails, and then all we need to do is apply this to the target. I haven't targeted the dragon, so that's why I'm dragging things over. If you have it targeted, then you can just click the buttons and it should apply as per normal. We can see down here, it says halved. And it went from 15 to 7.
And just ask for the damages and stuff. Does Fantasy Grounds always roll round down, or is it round up for some things and round down for others?
I think the rule over most every rule set is you round down.
It is in 5e.
And I know it is in Pathfinder, and I think it is in 3.5. I think everything is generally rounded down. So we can do advantages on saves, and then we would type in dexterity. Where would we find this? Scroll down to this little informational bubble, and here we go. Our stat, dexterity. Unless otherwise noted, which should be 99% of the times, keep things case sensitive. Dexterity is all lowercase, keep it all lowercase. Your damages, all lowercase. Your entangled or exhausted is a capital E, lowercase everything else, capital E, lowercase everything else. Any questions with this? At this point in time, I will say no stupid questions, so feel free.
I think it's just a matter of getting in and start playing with it.
Right. Bruce, as far as explosive dice, there may be a extension for it, or if you play a certain rule set, I think like 7th Age, or Fate, which uses it. Otherwise, I don't think out of the box it does either.
Okay, thanks.
So I do have one question for you.
Sure.
Let's say you get the Dungeon Master's guide as part of one of your 5e books, and you've got potions in there and magic items and so forth. Do those items are they available as items that you can then put on characters, and then do those have the effects that we're talking about here already on those items?
So, are they items in like an encyclopedic sort of way? Can I go into here, hit items, and then
I mean,
here
shouldn't you
players
be
only?
able to find a potion of healing in there already? I guess was kind of where I was going
Yes,
with this.
you should be able to find it. If I go in here and
Yeah, what I've found with, I don't know, as I don't know about for 5e, but for 3.5, the potions exist, but they don't have the effects on them. You have to create the effects separately.
exactly.
That's what I was wondering about. Okay.
So yeah,
It's caused me no end of pain.
Sure.
I just dragged a potion of healing into my inventory. There is no extra stuff
It's just
for
a
potion of healing.
label on a thing. In other words, it's just yeah.
It's your fluff text, yeah.
Although I actually just created a module like yesterday that I haven't even tested yet that should allow you to just grab the item that I've created, put it on your character sheet, and it has the dice attached to it.
So how did you do that?
You just
I
add,
I created it as a spell effect and just labeled it Potion of Healing.
So the same sort of thing that we did here and what Rob Tui does.
Exactly the
Not
same thing you
not to
were just
diminish
doing
it.
here.
What
So
it sounds like is it's always best to create a spell category of magic items that have effects so that you can do things.
you cannot have too few groups. So and I can go in here and all and say you're like, I know I have a potion of dark vision somewhere. Okay, cool. It's in the SRD. Cool. And then I could go to that group, SRD magic items in there. Um, yeah, I would keep whatever method of organization works best for you. If it is throw everything against the wall and see what sticks, if it is, make meticulous amounts of groups, whatever works best for you, do it. Um,
so,
because go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, so like here's a good example right now. You got a potion of cold resistance. I'm assuming it's just a label for a thing, and there's no actual code behind it. Let's say that you wanted to make your own list of magic items that you wanted to give out to your players, and then that would automatically, in this case, take half damage from cold damage. Um, would you create a new item list and then copy from the DM's guide into there and then modify it, and then that would be the new list of that item that you could use?
That would be how I do it. I'm loading up. So I am pardon my French, I'm a cheap bastard. I am not buying a pre-generated thing. So I went through and was taking a modular and adventure path for Pathfinder and hand doing it. So obviously we're going to hit potions and alchemist fires and special daggers and magic items and all that. So here I have my mummy's mask item group. And this is where I've got, an adamantine kettle because no one in my party could use a mace, so the monk got a teapot he could swing and hit people with. I have armor. I have a cloak. I've got a magic shield, wand of cure light wounds. So these are all the items that I can put in my parcels, which then I can populate my maps with.
Quick question: is it okay to have a duplicate name between the ones that you've created and the ones that are already in the existing list? Can you have duplicate items?
Yeah, you can.
Yes, because everything on that end from the back end is probably used by a unique ID. So while your potion of healing and maybe item number 5872, Wizards of the Coast may be item number 5 or something.
And once you've got two different items like that, is there an easy way to identify what group they're a part of, or so you make sure you give them the one that you've modified and not the one that's out of like the DMG in this case?
So I created a new group for Mummy's Mask, which is the name of the adventure
The-
path. So
Okay.
everything literally went in there. So what you were talking about earlier about going into the DMG, hitting the little info blip, and then changing the group and then dragging it back in and make your modifications. That's exactly what I did.
Okay.
So then what my characters did, and I will show you one of them. Is he had an extra stuff here. And so here's his antitoxin. Here's his fighting defensively. Here's his bardic knowledge, his power attack feat, his potion of cure light wounds, potion of dark vision. I mean, here's his bard stuff, here's his alchemist stuff, and here's his weapons. But anything else just goes into this other column.
And some of those, like expertise and so forth, power attack, those are all class features that you put in, right?
Correct. In earlier editions than fifth ed, you got feats a hell of a lot quicker than once every 4 levels of the same class. So this is one of his feats, and I have it labeled power attack -1 on melee attacks for +2 to melee damage attacks.
Okay.
And that should actually be for 1 round. But yeah, they have. Let me bring up Raz's.
I can see so much trouble with fake core set rules because of all the aspects and everything.
Fate and Savage Worlds, based on the sheer amount of stuff that's in there, could be a minefield.
Yeah, when
Oh yeah, and we're doing Dresden Files Fate, so it's even worse.
we normally play Rollmaster, and we've played that for years. And sort of when sort of lockdown happened, and we all sort of started like trying to do it over the internet. First thing I said was, I am not trying to run Rollmaster in Fantasy Grounds. It's not happening. We're going to third ed, so obviously. Because it's a lot simpler system, I just thought no. There's some systems that is not good to start with. I don't think. You want something simple.
Yeah, I would not want to try GURPS in this. It would be horrible.
Oh, yeah, no. Let me open up one thing so I can show you.
Yeah, I still get asked about it though. One of my players asked me the other day, "So you're not thinking of playing running Rollmaster again?" I'm like, "No, no, 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 no."
Isn't that one of the ones that still has the variable AC based on who's attacking whom with what?
Yep, that's the one.
And where you hit.
Yep.
If I remember, isn't that it's almost as bad as GURPS where it's like 5 tables just to figure out if you did damage?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, it's not so bad once you've got a party that all knows what they're doing, but new players, it's very very hard to get overwhelmed. I started running it years and years and years ago, and it's one of those things that I always think, oh, this system's too complicated, but then I keep running it, and I'm like, oh, I just know, should I be doing this? But I never quite get away from it.
All right, someone who's not a Pathfinder or 3-5 person, someone volunteer me and tell me what's happening with this code.
So it's giving a bonus to all those skills of 1d8.
Correct. So I can go in here. Here's my combat tracker. Rallo's got everything in there. And knowledge, that's fine. And we have our base dice, we have our effect dice. Our effect dice is labeled, and then it does everything. My knowledge engineering is still the static 10 from intelligence plus blah 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 blah. I could make this an extra d20. Notice my engineering stat still has not changed. So once again, everything is done on the roll.
I have to admit, my players hate that.
The extra effects.
No, the fact that everything's done on the roll, and the fact that they can't easily see it on their character sheets. I think
Okay.
AC is the one that drives them mad, because obviously once you've got a bunch of effects and you're doing a bunch of stuff, it can be quite hard to tell what your actual AC is.
So I am a big fan, and this is also how I DM. So your mileage may vary. Um, I do not sweat the small stuff in some cases. So if a player, for instance, is going to have +1 AC to everything in this particular dungeon, then just add the static 1 and be done with it. Um, some DMs aren't like that. Sometimes you cannot do that. Um, effects coding is very powerful, but you can also get bogged down very quickly in, well, I need an effect for this, an effect for that, an effect for this, and suddenly you're playing 4E, and nobody wants that. So don't make a heck of a lot more work, extra work for you.
Yeah, no, I have to admit, I put him on the character sheet for armor the other day for the mage armor spell because I was just like, you're never going anywhere without it. There's just no point it being an effect because you've always got it on.
You're level 8, you've got it for 8 hours, nobody cares.
Pretty much, yeah. I think that was pretty much where we were at. I was like, yeah, nobody cares at this point.
Is there a wiki for TUI?
Not as such. TUI was recently revamped and released as of, I'm going to say, 4 or 5 months ago. Um, I would say very basic things probably work. So attack and damage effects might work still because you're not really using AC in the way that it should be. I'm not sure if that's going to work, and you're obviously not going to be able to use grant advantage attacks on things.
Yeah, they are using THACO and all that good stuff. So
Right. We do have a couple of TUI people that I would talk to just in case. But there's literally nothing stopping you from slapping on something, throwing it in the combat tracker, and seeing if it works. Um, if you manage to crash Fantasy Grounds based on something you've typed in a spell effect, let me know so I can give you a prize.
okay.
Um, but yeah, it's their own built-in system. It's their own stuff. And at worst case scenario, you'll waste 5 minutes. All right, cool, whatever. I also the last time I touched TUI was probably 2 decades ago when I played Baldur's Gate on the computer. So I am probably not the best person to ask for that one.
Well, I haven't played 2E last 30 years, so
Okay, so we can stumble along together.
yes, sir.
Okay, last big thing I want to get into is something that was brought up before, and this was if targeting. There are two separate, I don't know if I can find it. Here we go. There are two ways you can query and look at other monsters and yourself and do various things based on it. Cat, this is where your Holy Avenger sword comes in. Um, if and if T, the T in this case stands for target, and it is not target as in the person you are attacking, it is the target that is making you do a roll. So if is generally for you. If you're a halfling, then you get an extra bonus or something. Um, if T, if the target is a giant and you have a Sword of Giant's Bane, if target is giant, then do extra damage. We can query things using if target based on alignment, size, type, wounds, and custom. So, and we're on page 19. This is where it gets a little iffy. Um, So if we take the example giant slaying axe, here we go. If the target is of the type giant, do an extra d8 of damage. Every time you roll, it checks, is the monster a giant? Yes, add the extra damage. Is the target a giant? No, it stops right here. It stops reading the effect. That's it. If you have stuff after this damage 1d8, it's going to ignore it.
So if you're creating custom NPCs, you need to make sure you got all that verbiage in there. Otherwise, this isn't going to work.
Correct. So let's take a look. Give me an NPC. Here we go, Asmar. That was from my previous class. So yeah, whoever said it, I have 2 copies of Azamar that are named the same as Azamar that are just floating here. Okay, so I have an Azamar under the type Outsider. That is what Fantasy Grounds is going to look for. If target type Outsider, do this. If target type Elf, do that.
Okay, so where did you put that on the weapon?
I'm sorry?
So sorry, did you put that on the weapon already?
No, this is on the actual mob, the NPC.
All
I
right.
think I think she's asking you, can you demonstrate how you would do that?
Yeah. Sorry.
Sure. Um,
It's 2 a.m. here, and
no,
I'm
you're
knackered.
fine. Um,
I saw that you were starting at 12 o'clock midnight.
Yeah, I'm sleepy now, and I'm in work in the morning. But I was like, I really need to know about effects.
your creature types, once again, we have our alignment, our size, and our creature types in this blue box here. There's one for Pathfinder. It may not be in a blue box, but it is definitely under all of these if statement and the things you can operate on.
Can you do an or statement? Like, can you say like if it's demonic or devil, or can
You,
you chain if statements? Like if celestial, if something else.
I've tried chaining if statements, it does not work. Um, you can comma things. So if type evil, comma outsider, or I'm sorry, if type outsider, comma devil. But I don't believe you can or it.
Does that, in that situation you just mentioned, is that an implied and? It's got to be both things.
Yes. So if you are targeting zombies versus vampires.
Okay.
All right. So what do we got? Asmar, what do you look like?
That if T with the commas, so like undead, comma fiend, comma celestial. We'll look at if any one of those returns true, it will return true and it will work.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Cool.
So that's an or statement for you. You just can't use different types of items or conditions.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm sorry. I was thinking then statement when I said no or statement. So you can't do an if then or if
An
and
else?
if not.
Okay. No else statements.
Well, you could put 2 separate types of condition on it. So that way, when you strike with your weapon, it does this type of damage for this creature, this type of damage for that creature. So, like if you have a giant and a dragon, and the sword does 2d6 against giants, but 2d20 against dragons, could you do that?
You cannot chain if statements. So what it does is it's if anything returns false, it generally stops. Doesn't even read the rest of it. It's just nope, I'm done, gone.
No, what I mean is you put in 2 separate effects. If type dragon, 2d20. If type giant, 2d8.
Oh yeah, if they're 2
On
separate.
separate lines. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Uh, um, Kath, I like the 5e because it gives you examples of working stuff, which is something that the 3.5 in Pathfinder does not have.
And there's your Holy Avenger.
There we go.
Sweet.
Okay,
Alright.
but again, you've put that on an effect at the bottom rather than actually on the weapon.
Correct. So in this case, what I would do for Rianu is I would just lob it on. So let me see, just make sure. Okay, dragon is a dragon. Azamar is an outsider. And of course, the one time I didn't do it. Right, because I'm an idiot. I will have to look at that.
I think it's because your Azamar doesn't just have outsider, it has something else along with it in the type.
Server says no.
Yeah, really.
I'm sorry, I lost video for a minute. What happened?
I'm making a right idiot out of myself.
If it makes you feel any better, I do training for because I'm a programmer for a living, teaching people how to do it, and you'd be surprised how often it goes wrong, like when under pressure.
Murphy's Law.
It's like the minute I'm like in front of people, I like completely lose the ability to speak and code.
And type and
Yep.
think and everything else. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, the stuff with the thing.
Well, my favorite thing is when I get caught up in something while I'm training, the thingamajig. And then they look at me and they go, and you've been programming for 30 years. Right.
That one's undead.
I think he's just trying to find an effect that works with the if statement.
Pretty much.
But aren't you in a 5e game right now? And you're looking at 3.5 effects?
Shouldn't matter.
Aren't the names slightly different?
I actually took out the name and they're replacing the types.
On the effect, it says if target is type undead. Well, you're not actually targeted against it. Is that the reason? I know you're like dragging it on, but that doesn't actually create a
That's a
target,
good
does
point.
it?
That's a
I
good point.
No,
I
that should work fine.
Should it? Okay. It was worth a go.
like I should. Really should not be that, but you know.
You never know.
All right, fine. We'll do this the other way.
You're already above my pay grade, so I'm just going to watch.
There we go. Stupid thing. Okay, I am not sure why the attack is not working in this case. Unless I was doing attack the entire time and not damage and just rolling. No, it wasn't. Okay.
Is that how a lot of this is going to be, where we just kind of play around with it until you find one that works?
I'm sorry?
Is that how some of this plays out? You just kind of play with different syntax till you find one that Fantasy Ground accepts?
It is a bit of that. Part of it is, yes, this is how it's supposed to be. The other part is uh, programmers in general, myself, I'm putting in that pile, are not the greatest of writers or describers of what you should or shouldn't be doing. Um, so, in some cases where this is typed out, I've seen people do this when it should really be, but there's no real proper description for it. So there is a lot of trial and error for it.
Okay.
Okay, so in this case, I've taken the assassin vine. I have made him undead. I have said if the target is of the undead type, give him 50 AC. You can see down here, defense effects 50. So in this case, Kath, and I'm trying to make sure you're not completely and utterly just gone. Yes, it should be able to be something that you target based on type, and then the player can on and off if it is something that is not against that particular item. So it is against only vampires as opposed to all undead.
Is there a way for the scripting to know whether something is equipped or not and to automatically use the features built into that item when it's equipped?
When you create the item, so we created these just by right clicking and hitting weapons. You can see we have no info blip. So these are literally just actions that are not tied to an item at all. As opposed to, oh cool, I have my wiffle bat from last time. If I take this wiffle bat is listed as a type of weapon with the various things filled out. If I drag it onto the character sheet, I have a wiffle bat that is operating off melee and does D8 slashing, magical, and cold iron damage. It applies once it is dragged onto the character sheet and then it is parsed. So if you just create something, you'll have to manually adjust or drag it into the party sheet and then back onto your character for it to fully take effect.
Isn't there a spot like an inventory where you can mark something as being carried or equipped or what have you?
You can, but it is just text until it is reloaded into the character sheet. So once again, that wiffle bat wasn't doing anything. You saw earlier, it just had wand and sword. It was still in my inventory this entire time.
Until you put it back on the party tracker and then brought it back out is when it took effect.
Correct. Because that's when Fantasy Grounds looks at it, says, hey, we've got something new. Is it an armor? Is it a weapon? Is it something else? Cool, we'll apply it.
Yeah, because even on the equipment list, it did not have the equip icon until you dragged it off and dragged it on again.
Now I can go in once it's a properly made item. And this is more impactful and visible with armor. But just change it, equipped, carried, equipped, not carried. The last thing I want to touch in with this before I take general questions on anything is custom ifs. That very first part, the D in demolition, the description, those are not only the bits that is human readable, but it's also the bits that Fantasy Grounds can create as a new grouping. So in the case of this, if the target has a custom description of Hunter's Mark, do an extra d6 of damage. And then you would put Hunter's Mark onto the monster. Let's see how bad this one screws up.
And does that bracketed C have to be on both of them?
I believe it's only on the first one, the Hunter's Mark with the damage 1d6. That is a
No, you put it on both.
Okay, so that is a concentration that when it takes damage, Fantasy Grounds generally knows who puts which effect on, and it will yoink it off.
And it will recognize Hunter Mark as an item.
So
It's a
I have
condition.
right. So I have on Rianu Keeves, if the custom is Hunter's Mark, do an extra d6 of damage. So what I'm going to do is just add a basic effect called Hunter's Mark, and let's put it on the Assassin Vine. Okay, so if this works, haha, I should be doing an extra d6 to the Assassin Vine.
There
We go. I can set this to have durations. I can set it to be just in general. If I have multiple rangers, I can make this custom whatever the heck I want.
And that just signifies that you've placed the Hunter Mark on the assassin.
Correct. So here we go. I have if the target is custom Hunter Mark Rianu, and then I could have another one that's Hunter Mark uh,
Sarah.
John. Yeah. That's doing on a completely different enemy.
Oh, cool. That'll actually help me with Fate, because then what I can do is I can have a custom effect for each of the characters for when they get spin or whatever and put it on the creature they're attacking with it.
That might be universal enough that you should be able to get away with it.
So on Pathfinder, do you clear the effects like you do on 5e? There's that button on the menu. It clears all the effects. Is that the same thing on Pathfinder?
So, sort of good point. When you put an effect on another player, player to player, player A puts mage armor on player B. Player A can remove the mage armor. Player B cannot. So the only two people that have the ability to remove any effect are the DM and the player that put it on the other player. There is an extension I've seen that allows you to remove stuff. However, you need to duplicate the amount of work. One of them is remove in square brackets.
I have a question.
Sure.
So for the Hunter's Mark example, I'm looking at the 5e effects wiki, and it says the DMG, the damage modifier, can target specific enemies. So what's the advantage of having Hunter's Mark as a separate effect to check for, rather than choosing the targeting feature of the damage modifier?
So in the
Hunter's Mark adds extra dice.
Well, yes, but
And only to the person who cast it, not for everyone who attacks.
yeah, but you can set effects to only apply against certain targets, and it looks like damage is one of those effects.
it is whatever's going to be the easiest way for you. There are exactly, I could put just a damage 1d6 effect and then use the crosshairs to
Okay,
target the specific person. Um, it might just be easier to target, control click, and then hit the button to apply the Hunter's Mark onto them and to you, and then call it a day.
cool. Just curious if I'm understanding that would also work.
various ways to do it, whatever works better at your
Okay.
table.
Thank you.
Well, and I mean, even in the example up there, when it was looking at the hunter's mark, it said specifically change the hunter's mark string to be unique. So if you had two rangers with hunter's mark, you could have hunter's mark Bob and hunter mark Charlie. And therefore, when you're placing the effect on a character, you could have that in the effects table and drag it over onto the creature that they're targeting and then clear it when it's gone.
Yeah, in the case of multiple warlocks with hex or witch's bolt or multiple rangers, you can it's literally custom, does what it says on the tin. That is everything I've got. Quick um quick leftovers. We went over concentration. Um if any of you are playing Starfinder, check the forums on Smiteworks website or badger some of them to see if we can get an effects page done. Savage Worlds has their own. Theirs is very different. Theirs has plenty more pretty pictures. However, you can add effects onto items specifically. These need to be in square brackets, and you generally use the skill name. I don't know if I have any Savage Worlds people here, but there are slight differences in what you're going to need to do in order to get your effects to work right.
In addition to the documents that you gave to us to download, and the wiki that you can attach to, what other sources for help in doing this kind of thing is there?
The general, I'm going to say big four, big six um, rule sets, we have the various chat text chat channels. So those are good places to start.
Is that on the Discord server here under
on
the college?
on this Discord server under rule set specific help.
Okay.
Alternatively, Smiteworks has their own Discord, which that is a lot larger. You may get a variety of options. Feel free to use whichever one gets you the better answer fastest. Um, Alternatively, the forums are on Smiteworks website are also good places. The forums also have places where you can try and find extensions that maybe can do what you're looking for that you can't out of the box do with effects coding.
Well, that's what I've been doing. I went like Fantasy Grounds has that YouTube channel, and then you can subscribe to that. And a lot of got some really good videos on effects, how to create mods, the whole 9 yards. That's where I go a lot.
Cool.
Um, that's everything I have. Sorry, I'm gonna only give you 6 minutes back.
It's okay.
For God's sakes, Kat, get some sleep. Um, I'm in the college and around. Feel free to send me a message on Discord. If there is anything you will have questions with, um, Cass specifically, Helgrim and other resources or other rule sets is a big 3-5 person. He's actually coded some extensions to help. He's a really good resource. I think he's also in Germany, so he's closer to your time zone.
Right, okay, cool. Good to know.
Great class. It helped a lot.
No worries.
Definitely.
Any other questions? Any um, asks if you want to see if you can code something or if we can run through something? At this point in time, it is completely optional. If it is late where you are, please get off and get some rest. It is only Tuesday.
So this is
Otherwise,
my first experience with the effects and coding. I haven't even played with this stuff yet, so this was like an introduction for me. So
the
thank you for that.
no problem. This will help you start things. We do offer proper effects and coding, which will go much more in depth into certain things with people who know better what they're talking about than I do. But this is a good start. It literally took me a good 6 months banging my head against the wall until I'm like, I need to fix something for this particular class I'm playing, and then it made sense.
Yeah, no, it's been really useful. Thanks.
And everything is quiet out there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was awesome. Gave me a lot of thoughts